It's very much my very own sort of search to remember the invisible in life, because in trying to paint from a different point of view what one sees, actually one starts to question, what are the invisible forces that make the visible. And
this is something that children relate to quite easily, I think. They understand oftentimes through image, perhaps better than, is this part of the?
Well, I think children, it's all so natural for them. And for a grown-up, you have to relearn and go back to, like I remember when I first started with the children, I used to be upset that they wanted to paint purple grass and, green people. And now I just think it's wonderful that they're free enough to do that.
You've given them the space to be able to go with their imagination, so that's very important. Could you describe a little bit the Montessori method and how it is different?
Well, the idea of Montessori is that one doesn't have to teach children, that the child is already born with a great desire to learn and a wish to understand and a wish to reach out and explore life, and that somehow when we come at the child trying to teach them what we think the child ought to know, we actually stifle their desire to learn, and they end up hating school instead of continuing wanting to learn throughout life. And
could you tell me something of the background of the lady? It was a lady that started.
Yes.
What was her name?
Maria Montessori.
Maria Montessori.
She first became a doctor. She was the first woman...
In this country?
No, in Italy.
Mm-hmm.
She was the first woman to actually graduate medical school, which in her time was a great feat.
Which is when, the time?
Well, in the Victorian times. It was about 70 years ago.
Wow.
And then she became very interested in children and in educating children. And she traveled all over the world and started schools. She explored and invented materials that would make learning interesting for children, because she felt that children are ready, willing, and able to learn all about their world. We just have to provide interesting materials for them. And
what were some of, can you give me examples of what the original materials were that she promoted or came up with?
She was the first one who started this hands-on approach, so that one might learn math by counting seashells or sorting seashells and arranging blocks from large to small, learning to count by using little objects. And she believed in offering many different subjects to the child, so that the child could find their own interest. And because interest is a real motivation for learning, and it involves the whole child when they're following their interest rather than something that somebody is telling them, you must learn this or you must learn that.
It seems to me that you have talked, in our previous conversations, you have talked about the nature of the emotion and the physical and these components and how they're taught in the Montessori school. Could you expand on that idea a little bit?
Well, I think in traditional education, too much emphasis is put on just the intellect, and it's taking the child as just a fractured part of a human being. And in some independent schools now, they try to work with teaching the child math and language and geometry by having them build stage sets and put on a play, for instance, so that they're doing math, they're doing language, and they're doing a lot of different subjects, but they're doing it while they're involved in something that they're interested in. And Montessori also brought about this whole idea of the hands-on approach, where the child is handling materials, and instead of having group lessons, she felt that the children should choose what they'd like to do from a variety of things so that they would be motivated again by interest, which is their emotions, and their bodies are involved because they're handling things and moving about the classroom. So again, it's the three parts, and when you have these three parts of a human being working in harmony together, it gives a sense of being more alive and being more fulfilled.
So the three parts are the emotional, the intellectual, and the body.
Right.
Is that the idea?
Right.
And then when you work with them one-on-one, the idea is that you don't interrupt, that you allow them to speak a lot. You want them to come up with different ideas?
To speak a lot and also to finish what they begin. I think that this is one of her most important ideas, that one should respect the child and respect their time, so that we're not imposing, oh, now you have to stop in order to eat, or now you have to stop, we're going to piano lesson, or now you have to rush because we'll be late for swimming. Instead of the parent imposing a schedule on the child, to give the child time to finish what they're doing, to take a walk and just wander here and there and examine.
Do you think we could do Montessori for seniors? Taking time for everybody, I think that's important.
Yeah.
You have a wonderful little puppeteer place or a game or theater. Could you explain that a little bit, or what you do with it?
The idea of puppet shows and drama, I think, are very important because children learn a lot through their imagination, through imaginative play, as well as the imitative play that Montessori materials train a child to function in ordinary life, being able to pour and spoon and play bank and so on. But the imaginative play helps the child to understand about the magic in life, and also the feelings, and of many of the fairy tales and myths from around the world give this sense of making extraordinary efforts to get something of value and using cleverness. I mean, magic is never just given free. You have to earn it somehow.
Right. And this is a little different from Montessori's method, this idea of telling fairy tales.
Yes, she didn't believe in fairy tales at all. She felt that the child should be concentrating on basing in reality, but this is an area where I disagree with Montessori.
Well, that's good. I think the whole nature, as my understanding, is she was someone that would have encouraged that, perhaps, at least to have a little, to show that people had their own imagination, their own way of doing things. So I don't see that as necessarily being incompatible.
Well, it also is a great aid in developing creative intelligence.
I noticed that this is also your home, and there's a kitchen and so on. Did the children also learn to cook?
Oh, we do baking and a lot of art projects and interacting with the farm animals, making maple syrup and picking raspberries and so on.
Okay.
And the idea of having it in your home, also Montessori felt that a home environment was a better environment to learn in than something that was very cold and institutional.
This is Mary Michelle. We're going to take a little break, and when we come back, we'll talk more about the Little Farm Nursery School here with Bonnie Wilder. This is Mary Michelle for VIP, and this is Taking Time. I'm back with Bonnie Wilder, the Little Farm Montessori Nursery School, and we're having a conversation about just what is the nature of the Montessori Nursery School. And we wanted to talk a little bit about the nature of all of those wonderful animals that you have outside, and what is that exactly is the idea behind having the animals, and perhaps is there a little bit of a risk involved?
Well, I think that it's very important for children to have real experiences. And unfortunately, life now, a lot of time is spent sitting in front of a screen for the child, and the young child really learns through interacting with real life. And of course, it evokes an emotion in a child and brings them very much to life when they're in front of an animal. They're a little afraid maybe that the animal might yell at them or bump them or bite them even, or they might just feel delight at seeing this living thing and feeling.
So it shows them really
life.
that that's what life is about sometimes, that you kind of have to take these little risks, at the same time be very careful.
But at the same time, if you see a child's face when they hold a little chick for the first time and they feel a vibration of life in that, that's like such an important experience, I think, especially when one is young, to have these impressions.
And what is the wonderful bird out there? You have some kind of an exotic
A
looking
very
bird.
strange bird. It's a guinea hen.
Uh-huh. Does it have a name?
Not really. We just call it that funny bird.
Okay. And what are some of the other animals?
Well, we have one hen. We're planning to get a rooster again and some more hens. And we have goats and...
Different kinds of goats.
Yes, a pygmy goat, an aunt, a mommy, and a little girl named Emma Whiteboots.
Oh, perfect.
She was named after one of the children, as a matter of fact, because kids are
Right,
so much alike.
Right, exactly. And then there's a horse, right?
Yes, we have a pony whose name is Mary because she's the color of a merry-go-round pony. In the summertime, anyway. In the winter, she's covered with heavy fur.
And a dog, of course.
Yes,
What's his name?
Duffy.
Duffy.
Yes.
There's also a garden. Do the children ever do gardening?
Well, when we had a summer program, we used to do a garden for the children. Now we do a lot of nature study, and we do planting beans and matching leaves, and we do some gardening.
Your husband built a wonderful elephant. Could you tell me a little bit about the elephant and what the children do with it?
Yes, it has nothing to do with politics that we have 2 elephants on the property. The elephant is the symbol of Somers.
Oh.
And my husband and I just like elephants. So my husband built a playhouse in the shape of an elephant, and then I painted an elephant with wings on one of the animal sheds. And unfortunately, sometimes the children see this picture of the elephant and they think there should be a real elephant inside, so they're a little disappointed at that.
Oh, well, they can climb around inside of it and play in it. It's almost like a
Yes.
little house, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, it's great. There is also this rather unusual structure out there, this hexagram, or this, is it a play? Something they
Oh, a
play?
climbing dome. Yes.
That's a wonderful, reminds me a bit of a Bertrand Russell kind of thing, or some far out idea. Is that an old?
Well, it's very sturdy, and the children like to climb on it. And of course, climbing and running and is all part of. Also, Montessori has exercises called grace and courtesy, which is something missing from life today. But it's really to show children a way to get along with others rather than pushing somebody out of the way. You can speak to them.
So is this how does this manifest as a game?
Well, she was the first one to bring a balance beam into the classroom so that the child could really use their body when they felt like it, not just have to sit in a chair. Because, of course, when she started, it was Victorian times, and they had these big desks bolted to the floor. And she was the one that freed it all and said, have little chairs and tables and let the child play on the floor. And
So this idea, I'm not quite sure, I don't quite get this idea of the balance beam and grace and what was the game?
Courtesy.
Grace and courtesy. So how does that work? They have to ask to be on it, or?
Well, there's exercises in courtesy are just to help the child get along in the world with other people, because, I mean, part of what one does in nursery school is socialize the child. So you have this very essential, self-centered little being, which you want to retain also. I mean, some of this inner strength and belief in themselves and self-esteem, but you also want to help them get along with other people, and that's part of being in a social group. And one of the things I said at the beginning, that one of the ideas of education is to nourish intelligence and caring in the child, that this is what human beings are about, or the best that one can find in a human being. And caring is being able to get along in a social situation, which a child already has in them, the wish to be accepted by the group and to have people be friendly toward them. They just have to understand what their limits are. And so one has to give them this in a firm, cheerful way.
Well, understandably. Is there a memorization process in this form of education? Do they learn poetry?
We do do poetry because that's really part of learning to love language. And instead of teaching reading and writing as sort of a separate skill, we take this whole idea of language as part of human intelligence and try to foster this love of language. And of course, learning poetry is part of that.
There is a particular poem you wanted to read. It's an Eskimo?
Yes, it's an old Eskimo song, and it's one of my favorites. And it starts out about, I think, over my small adventures and my fears and those small things that seemed so big, and all the vital things I had to get and to reach. And yet there's only one great thing, the only thing, to live, to see the great day that dawns, and the light that fills the world.
And so many of your paintings are about that kind of inspiration, aren't they?
Yes, I try to explore this idea of light, because of course light itself is invisible, but without that light or the energy from the sun, we couldn't exist. But of course we know it only as it is reflected off other things and what we intuit and sense.
Now, are there any political or religious feelings that go into the education that you give at Montessori?
No, I feel that basic wish of all human beings is to help their child and to work for their child's welfare, because the children are the growing tip of humanity. And so I think that we study ideas from all over the world, music from around the world. We celebrate different religious festivals from around the world.
Can you give me some examples?
Well, we'll do Hanukkah, but we'll also do like the Indians have, they light little candles and set them afloat in the water.
These are the Indians from India?
India, yes.
Any
And we also do a Native American chanting with the children and have them speak about the 4 directions, 6 directions actually.
Up and down?
Yes. And so I think that part of the child's enlargement of feeling that they're part of humanity is this wonderful variety of the world that we live in and all the different kinds of people and their different beliefs. And it makes a very rich world, and it also gives them this sense of tolerance, which comes first before love.
Is there a particular kind of psychology, or is psychology, again, something that is not, do you follow a particular brand of psychology, or are you interested in psychology at all? No, okay.
Well, no, I think that the psychology about what is a human being, I think it's all psychology. Mm-hmm. And it's really to be in touch with what's behind, and that's the intelligence, not, I mean, the reading, the writing, the geography, that's the outward map of, and the manifestation of the intelligence, but to really sense what this mysterious, marvelous thing in a human being is, we don't really know what intelligence is, but to stay in touch with that when one is with children. I think that's psychology, isn't it?
Definitely a part of it. I'm not a psychologist, but I'm sure they might sort of want to categorize it, put it into, different kinds of language. But I think your language suits the nature of my understanding of Montessori in my limited capacity. I wanted to ask you exactly how long you've been here in Katonah.
Well, I've been teaching for about 26 years, and I hope to keep going because this way of teaching is so alive, and it never gets boring because one doesn't repeat things over and over again. Each group of children is new, and there's always something new that I can learn from the children.
Oh, that's wonderful. Have any of them come back and seen you?
Well, sometimes I have children come back years later, and I'm looking up at them.
That must be fun.
And also we get little brothers and sisters, of children that we've had previous years.
Oh, well, this has been wonderful. I've really enjoyed our conversation here today, and thank you so much for taking the time. It was nice to meet you. I'm Mary Michelle. This is Taking Time. Thanks for watching. This is Mary Michelle for WVIP, and this is Taking Time. I'm here today with Ken Patton. He's the managing producer of the Yorktown Performing Theater. And I want to ask you a little bit how it was that you became, because you're recently the head of the theater, the managing producer, are you not?
Yes, I took over the theater in May of '95. And I started the process, I think, in February of '95. I had heard that the town was looking for someone to take over the theater, and they solicited bids from whomever wanted to come and make presentations. So I initially did a 17-page proposal to the town board outlining what I would like to see the theater become. Then I had a follow-up interview, and I think I did another 9-page follow-up proposal for. I mean, I was really cranking out the numbers because I think that this theater has a tremendous potential, and fortunately, the town board agreed with my thinking and my philosophy, and so I was brought on board, and I signed the contract, I think, in May of '95.
And what is your background? You were a child actor, as I understand.
Oh, I started at the age of 7 dancing in nightclubs as a dancer, singer. I worked with a band. We did tours throughout the Southwest, down into Mexico. And I did that until I was about 16.
Were these Broadway-type musical numbers? Or?
Well, they were nightclubs. They were nightclubs. And they were usually production numbers. They had, I mean, there were chorus girls. I mean, there was a whole 9 yards. It was a very unusual childhood.
So you grew up with the smell of the grease paint.
Absolutely, absolutely. I was going to school every day and working in the nightclubs at night, and somehow mixed in that I was a Cub Scout and a Boy Scout. It seems like when you're young, you can go and do, and as long as something has your interest, you keep going. And so like I said, I went full time to school and participated in the regular sports that little boys and little girls did. And then at night, I just went to the nightclub and performed.
That's
it just
amazing.
seemed like.
But of course, that's what you're doing here now, too.
Well, now we're putting in, I think usually I get here between 8 and 8:30 in the morning and leave around 11 o'clock at night. And when we're in production, I'm usually here maybe later, 12 or 1 o'clock. We've also, one night, the whole family came with bedrolls, and we spent the night here in the theater because we had to work on some lighting for one of the shows that was coming up, and it had to be done. So fortunately, I have great kids that chipped right in, and they came over with their backpacks and bedrolls, and we rolled them out in the lobby, and about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, we all went to bed.
That's great.
So yeah, it was a fun
wonderful.
thing. It was a fun adventure, I think, for the whole family. So we do whatever hours are needed to keep the theater going, and unfortunately, it takes a lot of hours.
The theater before was involved with the town, the local town government. There was some, in some capacity, the town was
Right.
involved with this. Could you explain
Yes,
that?
sure. Before I came on board, the town had an employee who ran the theater and received a salary and medical benefits and so forth, and I believe he had an assistant who was also on the town payroll. I think due to a lot of the towns and villages, and not only in Westchester, but probably all over the country, are becoming very conservative. They're looking for ways to cut costs. They're looking for ways to cut taxes. Yorktowners certainly need ways to cut taxes. There are high taxes here. So their idea was to make the theater self-sustaining. And so what I am literally is an independent contractor who runs the theater. It's still owned by the town, but I pay rent to the town. I am totally on my own, totally self-sufficient. And it makes it a lot more difficult. I think, first of all, you need to have the involvement of the town just to have their interest and to know that they're behind you 100%. It's more difficult when you're trying to do it all by yourself because
And you're doing a lot with the town, seniors and
Yes,
children
yes.
and all different kinds of projects you have going on
Absolutely.
here.
Well, I want the theater, first of all, I want it to become a performing arts center because I think there should be a lot more here than musical theater. In the past, it was primarily musical theater and children's productions. We've had classical music in here last December. We're working on the beginning of a youth symphony. We want to have a teen repertory company. We want to have our musicals. We're doing our first straight play, dramatic play in October. So we're trying to expand the theater and make it a performing arts center for not just Yorktowners, but all of northern Westchester. The youth symphony, for example, there's really not a venue for very talented young musicians in this area. My daughter was a member of the Westchester Strings, and she had to go down to White Plains for her rehearsals. She plays the violin. How wonderful it would have been, or can still be, for Erica if she can perform here at the Yorktown Performing Arts Youth Symphony.
Really?
So that's something we want to get going. But I'm sorry. When we were working with the town, one of the things that I wanted to make sure happened was the community involvement of the theater. That's why we have donated the theater for senior concerts, for the new Yorktown Chamber of Commerce came in, they had their first annual meeting here. The Yorktown Police Department had two all-day seminars here. So we're trying to be good community citizens, and what we're looking for is the support of the community back to the theater.
Well, and also now the theater is nonprofit, correct?
Yes.
Was it nonprofit before?
I really don't know. I don't know what how the previous management had set the theater up. We originally started out trying to be a for-profit theater. And what I found is the productions are extremely expensive. I know our first production of South Pacific, I think most people don't realize how much money goes into one of these productions. Well, I think it was about $42,000 to put on South Pacific.
Wow.
And that's because we used top professionals in musicians, the directors, choreographers, set designer, lighting designer. We want to bring professional theater and keep professional theater here at the theater, and it costs money. And most people don't realize that when they come to see a show here that $42,000 has been invested in that show with the hope that ticket sales will cover it. And more importantly, will not only cover the production, but help us pay our rent and help us make improvements to the theater. So, and feed my family.
Right. A lot of different things you got to do all at once.
A lot of things, yes.
Yeah. Well, and I know that unions are a problem and that kind of thing. I mean, not that everybody should, I think unions have their place, but I know that it's sometimes difficult to negotiate and make sure that you get the best prices.
Well, the Musicians Union has been wonderful, and because most of our musicians do belong to the local Musicians Union, and they've certainly worked with us. For our next production, Grand Night for Singing, I have worked with Actors Equity, and they've come to agreements with us to help us bring equity talent into the theater. But I say that, and then I also want to stress that my wife and one of our main objectives when we started this theater is there are a tremendous amount of very talented people in this area who didn't become actors, didn't get their union cards, who didn't become Actors Equity or Screen Actors Guild or any of that, because their life took another turn. They started out with a tremendous talent, but they became an accountant, or they got married, they had children, they wanted to stay home. There were so many things that happened, but the talent didn't go away. And I think this